We're sinking. Can you all please come?
And is everybody on board in good health otherwise?
Yeah, everybody's on board.
A single answer may now be one of the most important clues in the Nolan Wells case. During a distress call, the boat operator reported mechanical trouble and said everyone was on board, even though Nolan reportedly did not leave Horn Island with the group. Was that simply a rushed statement made during an emergency, or does it reveal a deeper problem in the timeline? The audio does not prove foul play, but it gives investigators a specific statement to test against phone data, GPS records, and witness accounts before the completed case reaches a grand jury. Today, we break down the audio, the timeline, and why this new lead matters before grand jury review. If you want the truth behind the headlines, hit subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases right now. We track the facts so you stay fully informed. Before we even dig into the technical side of this timeline, I think we need to just pause and remember who we are actually talking about here. We are talking about Nolan Xavier Wells. He was only 18 years old. He had his whole life stretching out in front of him, and now his family is left sitting in this unbearable waiting room, looking for anything that makes sense. It breaks my heart when you really think about the human side of this. We are looking at GPS coordinates and audio logs, but for his parents, this is about their boy who went to an island on the 4th of July and never came home. Wow. It is a heavy thing to carry. I want to make sure we keep Nolan right at the center of this, because getting to the absolute truth is the only way we can properly respect what his family is going through right now. The difficult question we have to talk about today is not whether that one specific answer on the distress call sounds suspicious. It is about what the caller actually meant at that exact high-stress moment. When you look at the facts of this case, this video is going to test 3 very specific revelations. First, we need to look at whether the towing call and the GPS movement actually support the claim of a genuine boat emergency. Second, we have to figure out whether the caller's answer fits the established account that Nolan chose to remain behind, or if it creates a glaring detail that investigators absolutely must clarify. And third, we are going to look at what this recording can legally contribute when the completed investigation finally reaches a grand jury. We have to be clear here. This evidence begins with the call and moves directly into the boat's departure at 4:31 p.m. Let us look at the verified call itself, because this proves that contact actually happened. According to reports, a person who was publicly identified as the boat operator contacted a private towing company. During this call, they reported that the boat's bilge pump had failed. They stated the boat was actively taking on water and they requested immediate help. Right? That is a terrifying situation if you are out on the open water. This recording proves the call occurred, it proves that professional assistance was requested, and it proves that the caller described a mechanical emergency to the dispatcher. But here is the thing. It does not independently prove the precise cause of the issue, nor does it prove the true seriousness of the boat problem. The very first open question that the police face right now is whether the boat's physical movement supports what the caller reported to that tow company. I see a lot of people online getting confused about where this audio even came from, so let us clear that up. This audio is not some anonymous social media upload or an unverified clip. NBC reported obtaining this through an official records request, and local reporting identified it as the actual dispatch audio connected to a private towing company. That makes it a verified piece of the timeline. But when investigators get a file like this, they do not just listen to it once and call it a day. They are going to examine the original dispatch recording. They will look at the exact timestamp down to the second, the caller's phone number, the account information, the towing company log, and they will want to speak directly to the dispatcher who took the call. They also have to verify whether the published clip we all heard in the news is complete or if it was edited for broadcast. The full original file may contain a lot more context than the short excerpt circulating online. This raises a massive question. What was said immediately before and after the publicly heard exchange? Now, we must test the emergency claim against the independent movement records. This is where the science comes in. GPS reporting obtained by CBS News from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows that the vessel left Horn Island at approximately 4:31 p.m. Furthermore, NBC's reporting indicated the boat was towed for roughly 3 miles before it returned to a normal speed. I see exactly how this complicates things. On one hand, that GPS data directly supports the fact that towing assistance occurred just like they asked for. It gives massive weight to their story, but it does not, by itself, establish why the bilge pump failed in the first place, how much water actually entered the boat, or whether an immediate departure was the only safe choice they had at that moment. You have to look at both sides of this fairly. The call and the tow activity absolutely support the explanation that the group faced a real mechanical problem. If you are taking on water, you panic and you call for a tow, right? That makes perfect sense. However, the family's lawyers are asking tough questions because no publicly released boat inspection report from the police has established the exact mechanical fault or its severity. Did the emergency explain why they left the island so quickly without explaining why Nolan was not with them? That is the void in the timeline that the family is agonizing over as they push for a deeper investigation. Let us go back to that specific phrase on the audio. The dispatcher reportedly asks a safety question, and the answer given is that everyone is on board. Wow. Think about how heavy those words are when we know Nolan was left behind. But we cannot use emotion to create lies here, and we cannot assume we know what was in the caller's head. If you are sitting on a boat that you think is sinking and a dispatcher asks if everyone is safe, you might just look at the 3 or 4 people sitting next to you and say, yes, everyone is on board. You are answering for the immediate physical safety of the vessel. The police said they initially did not suspect foul play, and they operated under the assumption that Nolan chose to stay behind. If that is true, the caller was not lying. They just were not including Nolan in the head count of a boat he was not on. But then I see the family's side of it, and it is completely understandable why this recording haunts them. If Nolan's phone and keys were still on that boat, as reports have stated, why wouldn't you mention to the tow company or anyone else that you had to leave your friend on the island? The family's legal team has pointed out these discrepancies because they want the absolute truth. They want to know why a group of friends would leave an 18-year-old on an uninhabited island, even if there was an emergency. The audio from the towing company does not capture Nolan speaking. It does not record an argument in the background. It simply captures a plea for help and a head count statement that conflicts with the reality of who went out to the island that morning. When the district attorney eventually presents this completed investigation to a grand jury, this audio is going to be a foundational piece of evidence. The court is going to have to weigh the verified mechanical emergency against the timeline of Nolan's disappearance. The grand jury will hear the police timeline, the GPS data showing the 4:31 p.m. departure, and the independent analysis requested by the family. They will have to decide if that rushed statement made during a distress call was just a tragic misunderstanding born out of fear, or if it points to something far more serious. Right now, this single answer remains one of the most critical, verified puzzle pieces we have, and it sets the stage for every piece of phone data and witness testimony that investigators are combing through today. Let us just walk through the exact timeline for a second, because the window we are looking at is incredibly narrow, and this is where the whole story really lives or dies. The relevant timeline focuses strictly on the afternoon of July 4th. Think about the setting for a moment. Horn Island is an uninhabited barrier island. You can only get there by boat, and you can only leave by boat. It is a holiday, so the water and the beaches are likely packed with people. But at the end of the day, everyone has to find a ride back to the mainland. According to the timeline we have right now, at approximately 3 p.m., Nolan was reportedly last seen by members of his group. Right? When you hear that, you immediately realize that everything hinges on what happened over the next 90 minutes. Around 4 p.m., that towing assistance call we talked about was made. Then, at exactly 4:31 p.m., marine GPS data shows the boat leaving Horn Island. Later that afternoon, the vessel officially received towing assistance and slowly made its way back toward the mainland. I see a lot of confusing reports about when they actually got back, so let us just stick to the verified numbers. A report from WLX based on data obtained by CBS lists the boat moving near Fort Bayou at 5:52 p.m. and finally arriving at a dock at 6:06 p.m. Meanwhile, NBC's account describes a return to an original departure location at 5:44 p.m. Because these different news stations might be describing slightly different locations or just summarizing the end of the journey differently, investigators are using 4:31 p.m. as the strongest, most reliable fixed departure point. That is the anchor. So the ultimate question hanging over this entire investigation is simple but heavy. What actually happened between Nolan's reported last sighting around 3 p.m. and the boat's sudden departure at 4:31 p.m.? The central debate in this case surrounds exactly what the caller meant by their answer to the towing dispatcher. Some people listen to that audio and hear a direct, undeniable contradiction regarding passenger numbers. They hear a caller stating everyone is safe and accounted for, even though we know Nolan was not on the boat. But there is another reasonable interpretation that investigators have to look at, and we have to look at it too if we want the truth. The dispatcher may have simply been asking whether everyone currently sitting on that sinking vessel was present and physically safe from drowning. In a highly urgent towing call, when water is coming in and the bilge pump is failing, the caller may not have understood the question as asking about every single person who originally traveled with the group that morning. The boat operator reported a severe mechanical emergency while stating everyone was on board. In official legal investigations, how do authorities differentiate between a statement made out of pure panic or confusion during a crisis versus an intentional misdirection? It is incredibly difficult. You are trying to read the mind of someone in the middle of an emergency on the water. If you haven't subscribed to U.S. crime cases yet, hit that button right now so we can keep tracking the facts together on this. Because of this ambiguity, investigators must clarify several very specific things. They have to find out exactly how many passengers were physically aboard when the call was made. They need to see whether the towing company or formal passenger count in their written logs. They have to ask the dispatcher what they actually intended by the question. Furthermore, police have to figure out whether the caller had already told anyone else on the island that Nolan was staying behind before making that call. And most importantly, they have to see whether all the passengers gave matching accounts afterward when they were interviewed by law enforcement. Was it just an ordinary emergency response answer given under severe stress? Or is it a statement that fundamentally conflicts with the later timeline? We just do not know yet, but the police are working to find out. Now, we have to separate the two main claims in this story, because this is where a lot of the public confusion is coming from. The publicly reported account from the group is that Nolan decided to remain on Horn Island and planned to return with another group of people. At the same time, the audio call supports the completely separate claim that the boat had real mechanical trouble. Right. But here is the critical part. The audio does not independently prove that Nolan voluntarily chose to stay. The boat had trouble. Nolan voluntarily stayed behind. Those are two completely different statements. Evidence supporting the first claim does not automatically establish the second claim as the truth. Just because the boat was taking on water does not automatically prove Nolan waved goodbye and said he would catch another ride. Because of this, investigators will need to confirm who directly heard Nolan say he was staying. Did more than one witness actually hear him say those words, or is it coming from just one source? When was that specific decision communicated to the rest of the group? Did anyone on that beach actually confirm that another boat had explicitly agreed to take him back to the mainland? You cannot just assume someone will give you a ride. Usually there is a conversation. Wow, and then there is the detail that really gives everyone pause. Was Nolan aware that his phone and his keys and his other belongings were leaving the island without him? If you are an 18-year-old planning to stay behind on an island to catch a ride with someone else later, It is highly unusual to let your phone go back on a broken boat. You would want your phone to coordinate your ride, right? These are the human details that investigators look at when they are trying to see if a story makes logical sense. They have to look at the psychology of a teenager on a holiday weekend and ask if the physical evidence matches the behavior. As we talk about all this, we also have to be incredibly clear about what the audio does not prove. It is so easy to let rumors run wild, but we are sticking to the facts. The towing call does not publicly establish that Nolan was involved in any kind of argument. It does not prove that he can be heard yelling in the background, despite what some internet theories might claim. It does not prove that a physical confrontation happened on that boat or on the beach. It definitely does not prove that anyone intentionally abandoned him out of malice, or that the caller knew Nolan was in any sort of danger when they pulled away. Furthermore, this audio clip does not tell us how or when Nolan passed away, and it does not prove that a crime actually occurred. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has formally requested original media, photos, and information about any disturbances on the island that day. But you have to understand how law enforcement works. That request is a standard part of gathering comprehensive evidence. It is a wide net they cast to make sure they do not miss anything. It is not a confirmation from the police that a violent altercation definitely happened. They are simply doing their job, asking the public for everything they have so they can piece together a complete picture of a very chaotic holiday afternoon. When you really step back and look at it, the audio gives investigators a concrete statement to test. It gives them a voice, a timestamp, and a narrative about a broken boat. But it does not provide the ultimate answer by itself. It is a single thread in a very large, very complex tapestry. The family is sitting at home right now, looking at that empty chair at the dinner table, just waiting for all these threads to be pulled together. They are not asking for a witch hunt. They are just asking for the truth about their son. They want to know the facts of those 90 minutes between 3 p.m. and 4:31 p.m. until the police, the independent forensic teams, and eventually the grand jury can lay every single GPS ping, text message, and witness statement out on a table and see how they fit. We have to respect the process. We have to keep our focus on finding the truth for Nolan without jumping to conclusions that the evidence does not yet support. Now, this is where things get really complicated online, and I need you to stick with me here because this is where the facts start to blur with rumors. People online are taking two completely separate pieces of media and mashing them together into one narrative. You have the first piece, which is the confirmed official towing company dispatch call. We know that is real. Then you have the second piece. This is that viral island footage floating around social media with all those disputed claims about voices or an alleged argument happening in the background. I see people taking the audio from the official distress call and playing it over the unverified beach video, and it is creating a massive amount of confusion, right? It is incredibly dangerous to do that. A friend of the group actually came out and publicly disputed the claims that Nolan was the person heard or seen arguing in one of those viral clips. Because of all this intense internet sleuthing, authorities have specifically asked the public for original, unedited video files. When you post a video on a social media app, the platform compresses the file. It changes the audio and it strips away the original metadata. Reposted or digitally enhanced versions can remove vital context or even introduce weird digital artifacts that sound like words or voices. Police said they need the raw files from the source to know the absolute truth. As of right now, no reliable public report confirms that an official forensic team has identified Nolan's voice or established that a confrontation happened based on that viral audio. Wow. Think about how agonizing that is for his family, having to watch these blurry clips on their phones over and over, wondering if that is their son in the background. Has the public discussion given an unverified viral recording the credibility of an official dispatch record? That is a question we all have to ask ourselves when we consume true crime content. If independent audio technicians do eventually isolate specific background voices or environmental sounds that conflict with witness statements, what procedural steps must a grand jury take to evaluate the credibility of that audio? The court said they cannot just play a downloaded TikTok video in a legal proceeding. They need the verifiable, authenticated truth traced directly back to the phone that recorded it. So how do investigators actually get to that truth? The towing audio only becomes a truly useful timeline lead when it is compared against hard phone and GPS data. This is where the digital footprint becomes everything. Following a formal meeting, District Attorney Angel Myers-McElrath and Attorney Ben Crump confirmed a mutual agreement. They are allowing the family's independent forensic team to jointly inspect Nolan's cell phone data right alongside the state authorities. That is a massive development. I see this as a way to build necessary trust because everyone, both the family's experts and the state's experts, is looking at the exact same numbers at the exact same time. That joint examination could potentially help establish exact communication times, background application records, and precisely where the device traveled that holiday afternoon. But here's the catch, and it is a heavy one. If Nolan's phone remained on the boat, as the current reports suggest, its location data would show exactly where the phone traveled, not necessarily where Nolan was. Right. Think about the gravity of that for a second. The phone could be moving at 40 miles per hour across the water toward the mainland, pinging cell towers the whole way, while Nolan is still standing on the sand at Horn Island. The DA and the family's legal team have agreed to this joint cell phone inspection, but they are going to have to separate the man from the machine. They have to prove where the person was, not just where the plastic and glass device ended up. What specific technical challenges do forensic experts face when matching cell tower pings and Life 360 data against official marine dispatch timestamps? It is not as simple as looking at a dot on a digital map. Water reflects cell signals in strange ways, and towers on the coast can ping from miles away, making exact triangulation really difficult. Investigators must meticulously compare the towing call timestamp, the boat's marine GPS records, Nolan's phone location history, the calls and messages involving the entire group, the witness descriptions of exactly where Nolan was standing, and any of those original island photos or videos we talked about. And just to be completely clear and factual here, it has not been publicly established that Life 360 has already confirmed the towing call's exact time or Nolan's physical location. The police said they're actively working on that. We have to wait for the actual science to come back before making any leaps. Eventually, all of this science, all of these data points, and all of these interviews are heading to a closed room. The district attorney agreed to present the completed investigation to a grand jury. Now, we need to be very precise with our words here, because the legal system can be confusing. Presenting to a grand jury does not mean charges have already been recommended. It does not mean investigators have officially declared Nolan's death a crime. A Mississippi grand jury simply decides whether enough evidence exists to issue an indictment. It does not decide guilt or innocence. It just looks at the puzzle pieces and decides if there is enough there to go to a real open trial. The thing you really have to understand about grand jury proceedings is that they are totally private. It is a secret process designed to protect the integrity of the investigation. It is just the prosecutor and the jurors in that room. Family members do not automatically enter the grand jury room to tell their story. Private attorneys, even highly experienced ones like Ben Crump, do not just walk in and present their own case to the jurors. For a later trial, or even in this preliminary room, authentication would usually involve proving that the recording is exactly what prosecutors claim it is. The court said they do that through the original audio file, the towing company's internal corporate records, sworn witnesses on the stand, digital timestamps, and a very strict chain of custody. Ben Crump's team can absolutely submit all their independent material to the district attorney. They can hand over every single thing their private forensic guys find, but they cannot control which evidence or which specific witnesses the prosecutor actually chooses to present to those jurors. Since the district attorney has committed to presenting this entire case file to a grand jury, we are left with a huge question. Does a recording like this towing call serve primarily as circumstantial background context, just painting a picture of a chaotic afternoon on the water, or can it become the actual foundation for a formal indictment? Will the complete unedited recording merely confirm a boating emergency happened just like the group said, or will its context create a material conflict requiring a much deeper criminal investigation? We will not know until those doors open. As we try to wrap our heads around all of this, we really have to ground ourselves in reality and empathy. This fresh lead, this audio clip everyone is sharing and analyzing, is not a recording of Nolan's final moments. It is a documented towing call made during the critical afternoon timeline. It clearly supports the group's claim that the boat required mechanical assistance, while the caller's headcount answer gives investigators a specific, recorded statement to formally compare against passenger numbers, witness accounts, GPS movement, and phone evidence. It is a dual-edged sword in terms of evidence. It may strengthen one part of the group's account regarding the broken boat, while raising very serious questions about another part regarding who was actually present. Until the complete records are examined by the professionals, it remains an incredibly important timeline detail. But it is not proof of foul play. It is not proof of guilt. And most importantly, it does not tell us what actually happened to Nolan Wells after that boat departed Horn Island. We are dealing with a real family here. A mother and a father are waking up every single day, looking at his photos, hoping the phone rings with an answer that makes any sense at all. They want to know how a fun holiday weekend trip turned into the absolute worst day of their entire lives. We owe it to them to stick to the verified facts, to avoid making up stories, and to let the legal system do the heavy work it was built to do. We just want the truth, and we want peace for the Wells family. Thank you for staying till the end to follow the facts with us. If you want the real truth, please subscribe to U.S. Crime Cases.